To just his right, we have Sampriti Bhattacharyya, who is an PhD candidate in robotics at MIT. She is the founder of a startup called Hydroswarm. We're going to hear a lot more about that. She was a winner of Mass Challenge last year. She's on the current Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Very fascinating woman, and I can't wait to discuss with her everything from robotics to AI to underwater drones. Yeah. So let's give it up for Sampriti.
You don't have to get on.
All right.
A nice way to start, right? It feels so good.
Get the blood flowing. All right. So to begin, we've been beginning each of these keynotes just with a question about, I just gave you, I give people a brief idea of who you are, the big topic items. But tell us something about yourself that wouldn't show up in your official bio.
So people ask me who's my role model and who inspires me.
Yeah.
They get an unexpected answer. I mean, it's Steve Jobs, Elon Musk are all great. But my real role model is Tony Stark. Iron Man.
Nice.
Iron Man.
I always tell he's everything that I want to be.
Me too.
Yeah? Excellent. That's a great role model. So,
well, kind of. I mean, he's got some rough edges.
Everybody has that a little bit.
That's true.
Work hard.
All of a sudden, this turned into Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Which I'm totally okay with.
All right, excellent. So let's before we get into the deep topics of robotics and AI, let's talk about you as an entrepreneur first. Tell us about your journey as an entrepreneur. How has it been a lifelong pursuit? Did you always know you were going to be an entrepreneur? Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and background and how that came to be.
Well, so I was born and raised in India in a city called Calcutta. So I did not really know what an entrepreneur was for a long time. But when I was growing up, I was just a person who was very adventurous, and I liked to explore new things. So I was fascinated by space. And when I was young, up to the 9th grade, I actually wanted to be an astronaut. I graduated high school, and I got into a teeny-weeny college, and, well, astronaut's dream gone. Because, of course, what you're going to do in a small college in India, nobody cares.
Yeah.
But what I always enjoyed was doing projects. I always came up with some idea that I wanted to do, and I would just, that was my hobby kind of thing. I enjoyed creating something new that would solve a problem, always thinking what's there, what's not there. So the way it worked was that even though I went to a small college, and in India, if you're familiar with the whole IT sector, most of the outsourcing comes from a lot of people in India. And these colleges that I went to, it basically, no matter what you study, that's what you go into. You become one of those people who talk to you on phone and say, "Hi, Mr. John, how can I help you?" So that was my career path. I was going towards that.
Okay.
But on the side, as a hobby, I was learning astrophysics just for fun, and I was just. But just as a hobby.
I'm not sure that's a hobby.
Well, I was really interested.
It's a side hustle. It's more like a side hustle, right?
I was just really interested what's out there. Right?
I can see the Tony Stark connection.
So I ended up being a loner in a college a little bit because I wanted to build. So I saw that the spirit and the opportunity that went to Mars, and I saw that they got stuck because of a sandstorm, and I was like, that was stupid because they should have a solar panel, first of all, that could just rotate and orient itself towards the sun so you can get maximum energy, and second, you should have a fan or something to get the dust off. So I ended up doing this whole project on space, got some of my friends together, and made sun tracking solar panel, and that was the first robotics project that I did. And it was crazy because in India you don't have Amazon, MapMaster, or anything. You just go to the old, kind of market where they send broken electronics part, and you just figure out how to get aluminum part, ask somebody to cut you a piece, or get a motor out of a fan or something like that. That's how you build stuff there. So So then I was like, great. I heard some of my friends who went to like the top schools in India, which is the IIT, and everybody mistakes that I went to IIT. I did not go to any of the Ivy League schools or anything. I heard this word called internship, and they said like, oh, you can go to America and like do a summer there. I was like, that's crazy. Like, you can actually go somewhere, get paid for it. This is awesome. So, and I've never been on a plane even by that time. I was 20. So what I did was like, I want to do an internship. How do we do that? So I ended up like figuring out like literally anything that says research institute in America. And I just like, whoever I could, just 4 or 5 people, CC, I'm a student, I'm building a sun tracking solar panel, I want to do this. I was fresh, second year student, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to do an internship. Nobody was replying. Like, I don't think anybody was like reading my random email from a random college. And but I ended up sending like 500 email. And I got 4 reply, out of which 2 of them I got interview with, and then 1 of them worked out. Wow. And
yeah, 1 out of 500, not bad.
1 out of 500. So I'm a pretty nagging person in a sense.
Grit. Yeah, you got grit.
It's the good type of nagging.
That's right.
So where was that internship?
It was in a high-energy physics lab in Chicago. So Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, Fermilab, which is the world's first particle accelerator. Before you had the CERN Large Hadron Collider, we had the world's largest particle accelerator.
Yeah.
But the thing was, I was fascinated is that there simulate particle interaction to understand how the Big Bang or the universe was formed. And I was like, okay, it's one step closer to being an astronaut. Okay, kind of.
Yeah.
So I worked there, and that was the first time I actually had an experience of real hands-on engineering, because in India, you memorize books and cheat and pass exams or whatever, you get a degree and you go to IT. And it was really hard for me after I finished that internship to come back and accept that I'm going to work for IT, because you know that's your option. On the other hand, you don't feel it in your gut. Like, you're not happy going with that choice. They liked my work, so I got called back again. I graduated undergrad and went to do like a 9 months, like a co-op internship kind of. Yeah. Back in Fermilab. So I worked on a number of research and stuff there. Went back to India. Actually, I thought I might be getting married, because that's what Indian girls do after they graduate college. Okay. But luckily, it didn't work out. So, I ended up being this brave soul who backpacked the entire country for 6 months to understand the relevance of life, then figuring out, my grad school offer letter just came from US. I got in Ohio State. One more step closer to astronaut, I got in aerospace engineering. Excellent. So, fine, I moved back to States and to do aerospace engineering, and now, there wasn't a whole deal of funding in Ohio State to do any Boeing project or anything. I mean, I was a foreign national, so I was not going to get into all the school projects. So I got funded by the same lab where I interned, Fermilab, and I was working on a nuclear, and I ended up working on a particle accelerator, but then changed the whole thing to my taste and made it into a design of a new kind of a nuclear reactor, a green nuclear reactor, essentially one that produces energy from radioactive waste. So that was my master thesis. Okay. But then, even though I was doing that, I still really wanted to work for NASA, so I kind of emailed them. And the straight cut answer, I guess, I'm sorry, you're not a US citizen, you're a civil, we just only can work with civil servants. Okay. So I was like, well, but there was a time when that was not true, because there are Indians who work at NASA. Yeah. So how can you backtrack and see, there must be a way, there must be some way, right? So I go to LinkedIn and start stalking people who work for NASA. And I tried to see who are foreign national there, and there were a bunch. Yeah. And I go back to them, so how do these people work? Some are postdocs, they they are not US citizens or something. There must be a way they are connected with NASA. So then I found out one thing led to another. I found out through my advisor that NASA Ames, for example, had a federal contractor on base, so you can work at NASA, but government doesn't take your liability. The contractor is responsible. But there I go. That was another 200-300 emails maybe, but that got me the internship.
So you got an internship at NASA?
I got an internship.
Okay.
Yes.
That's pretty close. You're getting pretty close to being an astronaut there.
Right.
And I was almost probably going to go that way. Then I got distracted by, seeing Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk that summer, and kind of like almost between, like, should I go to space or should I just start my own space thing? But that was actually my first experience to see that all this while, I always got excited with new ideas, but I had this idea that a company started by a really old CEO, and you go to Silicon Valley, there are people of your age, and then you're like, okay, they are of my age, they have as many hours in the day as I do, and they are changing the world. Like, they are doing incredible things. So what can I do? Like, I want to do something awesome. How do I go about this? It wasn't obvious because I was a foreign national, always terrified of doing anything that would get me deported. So my first so-called, thing that I tried out was a nonprofit, and that's the start of this whole entrepreneurial thing.
Wow. All right.
Wow, there's so much in there to unpack. I love
so
it.
many hobbies we could talk about.
That's right. Wow. Where do you want to go?
Well, just briefly, what was the nonprofit?
It's called LabX Foundation. So it was the same idea that, I went to a teeny-weeny college where people thought the best I could do was in IT or be a housewife. So all it took was just one opportunity to change. And they have over 1 million students in India applying for engineering. You're wasting a huge amount of talent sources. What can you do? If you could give the right opportunity to those people who are hungry for it, you can make leaders who can bring huge changes to their own community. Like, you can make society self-sustainable by, giving the right kind of opportunity. So we used to bring interns out to the US with the thing that when they go back, they have to do something to give back. So that was the model.
Specifically on India?
We started with India because that was the thing I'm most familiar with, And then we did like 40 design workshops. We funded some poster research competitions and so on.
All right. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So we were talking earlier during lunch about some of the work you do to sort of give back into the community that you do. You do some work with robotics for kids, right? Is that right, girls?
Yeah, so it was just a fun experiment, I guess. Like, so I'm terrified of being a TA. Like, I don't think I can go in a class and just teach a class. I just really like something more actionable, like hands-on and like working into, making tangible stuff. So we have an IAP for undergraduates, for grad students. Everything is research all the time. So IAP is an independent activity period where like MIT undergrads can like do whatever they want, learn something they want. And I put together a self-created class or whatever it is. It was like, you can come in, build some robots, because I have a ton of materials, and if you build some robots, they won't go waste. But more than that, you can learn something, right? And it ended up with a bunch of girls who applied for that thing, and some guys, a couple guys, but had more girls. And they're brilliant. They were very smart, and they're at MIT. When you admit at the very beginning, you have 50% ratios, so they get equal number of girls and guys, which is fantastic. But if you go to this active club group, so if you go to like the Formula One race team, Hyperloop teams, or anything like that, you'll see that they're 99% guys. And I was very curious, why is that? So I asked these girls, they're 4.7 out of 5 GPAs, super good. Like, why aren't you in this club? So they say, well, we went there, but it seemed that everybody there already knew what they were working on. And, as students, especially MIT is so competitive, to admit that I don't know something is like a huge deal for undergrads somehow. And so these girls, so this is chicken and egg problem, so they did not end up going there learning anything. They went to the labs to get Europe positions, but then the labs say that, well, do you have prior experience? But where will you get the experience? You have to give an environment where you're okay, where you mess up, where you fail, and then you learn, right? So when those girls came to the lab, they just were terrified of even turning on the power supply for like the motherboard for like 3 hours, and then they're calling me, should we turn it on? After 3 months, you come to my lab from midnight, right? I have a bunch of girls playing music really hard and working on the drill press, laser cutter, and it's like what they call a bro shop, but no, I have a girl shop right there, like building awesome stuff. And they built 2 really cool underwater drones this in the last 3 months.
Awesome. So, there it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's a perfect segue into this. Why don't you tell us about what this is?
Do you want me to hold it?
I mean, yeah.
Well, so I actually like to personalize everything because people think robots are these obscure things, kind of, detach themselves away from, whatever it is. It's called Evie. Well, the MIT one is called Evie. I also like robots that have girly names. There are not many of them. Ellipsoidal vehicle for inspection and exploration. Hydroswarm has Eve 2, ellipsoidal vehicle for exploration. What it does is that we were developing small egg-shaped robots when I joined MIT. So one thing leads to another. I was designing nuclear reactors, joined MIT to work on robots for nuclear reactors. So boiling water tanks. It's pretty radioactive, and you want to toss in things so that they can go in this complex environments and basically look if there is any cracks or crevices, because if there is radiation leakage, you don't want another Fukushima, right? So the whole idea was like, can I have something that is smooth, that wouldn't get tangled, throwing in there? And my professor and his previous grad students were making those egg-shaped robots with a different name, but yeah. So I went in there. My goal was to make something that can not only go in the tanks, but imagine it can stick to the walls on the tanks or pipelines, because a lot of the damages on structures are not something that you can see. It's internal, right? So usually they use vacuum, they can use magnets, but my research particularly are in exploiting hydrodynamics. So this is a vehicle that I use, essentially. I made this is a flat surface thing that is supposed to go underwater, stick on surfaces, and see internal cracks. But that's boring if you just think about it like that, right? So I got bored after my qualifying exams. I needed a bigger purpose in life to live for. And I was hanging out in California, and I heard about the marine mammal program, which is like you worry so much in airports that what are the threats? Do you ever think that the seaports are way more vulnerable because there's like big ships, small ships? You don't know which is carrying a nuclear weapon in it, like something that has a bomb in it, something that can have crazy weapons being smuggled or what it is. We can't monitor them. It's very complex to do that. We can only monitor people who come off from the boat. So the idea was that, well, they use the marine mammal program basically trains dolphins and seals, and they go and sniff this ships and stuff. And I'm going to San Diego right after this, and that's where the base station is. And you're like, but this is not scalable. How many dolphins in the world are you going to train? So now there are other things, right? There are like large torpedo-shaped bluefin 21 and stuff. These are multi-million-dollar vehicles, but how many of them can you put? It's too expensive. So that's when I was like, if I could make something that's cheap, simple, and scalable to put in the water and scan ship hulls that's in the port, that's cool. So that's when I made the transition from something that was going to be used in maybe 10 nuclear reactors, 20, to something that could be used in plentiful. The basic fundamentals is the same, but you have to recognize a problem that is in much more need, where my solution is probably way more optimal and can find use in it. So from there, it was just a start. It was, that's when the whole thing of Eve, like it's the analogous of an aerial drone. So aerial drone underwater, right? You can toss it down, and you can mount any plug-and-play sensor system, and it can follow you around if you're scuba diving, or you can use a number of them to monitor large areas of ocean, like find a lost airplane, Malaysian Airlines. So this is a part of a distributed sensor network. That's how I define it.
Right.
Whoa.
Yeah. No, when she was explaining it to me earlier, it was it's one of these things that just the story is so simple because it makes the application make so much sense, and you can keep on coming up with new applications. I mean, 71% of the ocean of the planet is covered in ocean, and I mean we can use these to even map the ocean floor, right?
Yeah, and you know less than 5% really actually, and yeah, you know more about the moon surface than you know about the ocean.
Right. So I mean, everything from that to, as you said, DoD security.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, and recreational. If I'm a scuba diver and want to, and you said so, it's a plug-and-play sensor. So that means that, for instance, the Malaysian Airlines, you were pulling your hair out looking at that rescue operation because you were again looking at an inefficient way of doing things, and you were like, oh my gosh, if they had just done X, Y, and Z, they could have found the plane much easier because a plug-and-play sensor, you could just put a hydrophone on that, is what you were telling me earlier.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And so tell us about the fact that, there's a single drone, but Hydroswarm, you have this idea of there's actual swarm. So there's a little bit getting into the AI aspect of this. So, because of just the medium of the ocean being the way it is, these have to be autonomous.
Right.
So
right.
And so tell us about the autonomy of these, the AI, the fact that they can communicate with each other in like a swarm, I guess.
Well, first, for full disclosure, we are all in testing phase. We haven't deployed in any wild ocean yet.
Right.
So
you cannot get these on Amazon yet.
Not yet. Not till I graduate and submit my defense thesis. That's a very big precondition.
She made a promise to her professor. She can't even raise. She's been approached. Correct me if I'm wrong. She's been approached by many high-profile investors, and she can't start accepting money because she promised her advisor that she has to defend her thesis first. So, but it's awesome. I love it.
So the idea is that if you think about it, right? I mean, let's see the future and then extrapolate backwards, I guess.
Yeah.
You have a Google Maps of the Earth, of the land. At some point, you would need a pretty detailed map of the ocean, and the way I think about it is like creating a Google Maps for the ocean, right? If you could know, like, the distribution from anything, from minerals to different kind of chemicals, and each and everything in the ocean water, to how the seafloor is, to know where the optimal oil sites are, there's so many new economies, there's so many new market and opportunities that can, open up. That is unbelievable if you even think about it, right? So to me, ocean, when I really understood that, only 5% is mapped, and I was like, I used to be in aerospace, and now suddenly ocean, which I knew nothing about and didn't care, in the sense that it was very beautiful, but I loved being on the ocean for fun, but I did not really think the opportunities from a very, other perspective, right? I was just fascinated, and the first question I asked, why is it so hard? We can go to the moon, and it's so hard to go to Mariana Trench. Why? So to map the ocean, the big problem that we look at as today is that we don't have a method of measuring or monitoring large-scale ocean areas in a cheap or scalable way. There's something where I can use lots of sensors and so on and so forth. So that's where these things came in, that if I could put many of them, and we worked out that how would you deploy them and how would you get them back. But if I could, I see a future where the ocean is connected by an interconnected sensor network that is constantly taking real-time data and taking new information in, and there is a new kind of infrastructures, new fleets, and lots of new opportunities. There's a whole new world underneath. So for that to happen, this design that we came up with, this is ocean-friendly in that sense also, to do minimal damage to the environment and so on. A lot of them work together, collect data, and when you know their location, you can position, do a mapping of, X, Y, Z versus this. But here's the thing, right? Before we go to that grand picture, first you're going to have only certain organization using a bunch of my drones, maybe 30, 40, 50, right? And before those whole cool infrastructure even comes in, how do these things operate together? So imagine you're a ship who is trying to search for optimal oil and gas site, a place for drilling, right? You throw a bunch of them. At the large level, they cover large areas, but the resolution is smaller. The resolution is not very high. Yeah. But where the intelligence come in is that you compare data between each of these agents to understand that what is really the area of my interest. Think of a flexible grid structure, the grid that is not fixed. So if you think of a grid where you're putting sensors, and if you can put static sensors and they can just keep measuring even though everywhere of the grid is not of your interest, but if the grid can move around because they can figure out what are the areas that they are getting signals that are more relevant, then most of the swarm, they come more to that area. Now, when you have more of these things towards a particular area of interest, you go higher up in resolution, right? And lower in coverage. So that's the way we approach the problem. Now, currently, the approach is that, okay, you can do static bed sensors, that you can go have a robot go underneath, put like static nodes on the bottom of the bed, but then you leave them for like months and months, even though all the area might not be even relevant to you. When you have things that move, you coordinate. Now, the thing that we say AI now, the thing is, as a roboticist, it's this funny experience because AI, the threshold for AI changes every year, Essentially, AI, artificial intelligence is, okay, can a robot make an intelligent decision? What is intelligent decision? I mean, if you touch something dangerous, it stops. That's an intelligent decision. Some things have that. You don't call it artificial intelligence anymore. There is vision, right? I mean, there is using computer perception. We said, like, can you perceive the environment? That is also a part of AI. And that's so much use that you forget that actually AI is in so many things that, look at cameras that are taking data in. That's actually also was a part of AI. So right now it's more into natural language processing, using neural nets to make like random decisions and stuff. Would we be using AI? Yes, enough to the thing that it will be learning the environment, and that's very important because that's when I go to the future, and I think that we have done enough technology, and it's awesome. And in the process of that, we have also destroyed the nature quite a bit. And even though I'm a technologist, I don't want, and I love creating technology, I do not want to be a part of a destruction process. So creating things with intelligence, design, in this case, learning. You learn about the environment, you know that, are you disturbing anything? Are you, as you live with the marine animals, because that's what you're going to do, to make it more and more like a fish so that it fits into the environment, essentially, right? So that's what we want. We want it to fit in the environment, not like, how do I say, push it into somewhere and destroy what's out there. So that's where learning algorithms comes in. That's where collective behaviors comes in. Fishes have that. So these are the kind of the things that go in here.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, so she considers herself a roboticist, and AI is just another hobby. Right?
It's a tough thing. You don't trust AI too much. Not now. Not yet.
Yeah, AI is really interesting. It's always the AI is always something that we think that we are striving for, and all the stuff like Siri. We would have, before Siri was around, we would have thought like, oh, that's AI. Now it's just Siri or Alexa, right? But AI is always ahead and forward. So just your question.
All I was thinking about when you were talking about was the Terminator, because that's what I think half of the people always think about when they think about. See, there's some heads nodding out there. See.
Me too.
So you participated in the Mass Challenge. You won the Mass Challenge. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience meant to your whole your process of developing, thinking about building this company?
Yeah, I think I started as a solo founder, and everything happened just so fast. I did not even have a time to form a team because it was last year in February or March. I was, reached out by Techstars, and I couldn't go to San Diego, so I participated in Mass Challenge and MIT 100K, got into all of them. But as a person, you need some sort of a structure. If you have never done it, you don't know what steps you go through, right? I have an egg-shaped robot. Now, that's cool. Like, how does it work? How does it fit into the environment? And being with other people, co-creation, like in an ecosystem where everybody's excited, creating something new, the energy, and having people that believe in you, that's like so important, because I could have all this vision and I could be just in my own little world excited, but the urgency and the hustle that you need to really feel and even inculcate in yourself to say that I have to deliver this world because there is a world waiting for this to come. That's what you feel in that ecosystem, and that was exactly the support system of Mass Challenge. It's incredible, connecting you with mentors, partners, like big corporations that like come and wants to talk to you to see like what are the possible ways of collaborating. So it was literally gave me so much exposure that was great. Yeah. I think that it was I wouldn't have been here definitely without Mass Challenge for sure.
That's great.
I think it sounds like you are a natural entrepreneurial. You see problems, you solve them. So far with your experience with Hydroswarm, tell us about maybe the biggest challenge you've faced.
With Hydroswarm?
Or it can be outside of Hydroswarm. As an entrepreneur, I guess your greatest challenge.
With Hydroswarm, it has been like doing a PhD and suddenly having your startup take over and getting that kind of traction that you were not really thinking or planned for.
Right.
It's so exciting, but it could just swamp you. Like, it's crazy, because that's when you realize, this is why people drop out. I get it.
Yeah.
But so I think that's the biggest challenge. So you just kind of would beat yourself up on it because you're not having time for everything, right? There's so many things you can do, and sometimes you don't want to do any of that either. Also, there's some me time needed in life. But the challenge is like you have to accept that I know things are not going as fast as I would want, and I think that's where I always struggle, because it's like you're panicking as if time is passing by and there's so much to do. So I think that was my biggest challenge. I would get very terrified that how would I manage both of these, and recruiting a team. It's really harder to recruit a team. Once you have founded, you have already got grants, money, and stuff in, and then you're like, well, I still would like a close co-founder or something like that, but you're at the later stage. And then, when I went with this crazy idea, right, I mean, it was not easy to get people on board, because not everybody understood the capacity of it. But then again, you get press. Then there's way too many people who wants to join. So like even figuring out when you have, like, you wake up every morning and I have 122 emails and from people to reply, and then you're like, if I do that, I will not graduate from school, or neither will I do a startup.
Right.
So those has been sometimes very stressful just to, figure
Juggle.
this out.
Alan Falcon, who spoke last year during Maine Startup Create, he called that the burden of being on the Inc. 500 list.
Yeah.
That there's this moment that happens, and there's a lot more research that's coming out around honestly, the emotional toll of being a founder, and sort of the loneliness that can happen, and the importance of having that support network of people. And that just gets magnified when those events happen. And so he talks a lot about that, and while we hope that people aspire to that, it's also important for those of us who aren't in those companies to be mindful of that in how we support folks like you and others.
I think one of the most important thing, and I'm trying to work on this, is like a support system is very essential. Doesn't need to be a huge people's group. It's like 4 or 5 people, but really genuinely invest in each other. Like 4 people, non-competitive field, but really invest in each other, where you are saying that, hey, I'll help you to be the best of yourself. And we all going to be like like accountability peer almost, right? Because the problem is with people like us and the kind of environment, there's a lot of competition also in school, in everywhere. Oh, somebody's doing that, somebody's publishing a journal, oh, you're behind, right? So you have to form the right group where every person of the group feels invested in the other person and really help to push each other to be their best. And I don't know, I think that could be very useful.
Do you have a team? I'm actually not sure.
In Hydroswarm?
For Hydroswarm, yeah.
So right now what I have is I have a couple of I'm a solo founder, but I have a couple MIT graduate students, right? And outside we have a couple DOE and DOD scientists who work in collaboration with me. Okay. And I work in collaboration with labs that are developing my tech as contractors.
Okay. So. I think what we were talking about is not just your team, your founding team, but also your peer team.
Right.
Mentors, so how do you surround yourself, not just with mentors, but other colleagues at the same level?
And sometimes people just entirely different than what you do, actually.
But sometimes that's healthy, right?
Because otherwise you're monotonically thinking in the same direction. I mean, I just start having group with a bunch of girls, and I made sure that they have nothing to do with startup stuff and things like that. Someone is a yoga teacher, someone is like a doctor, someone's different aspects of life, because otherwise you just get very focused on looking at life in one way.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell us about, I just forgot the question.
I'll jump in. Do it. We're in this together. So you were telling me earlier, you were alluding to some of the challenges that you've seen in younger founders particularly, and how to, that younger founders, they get not just overwhelmed, but all of a sudden there's this exciting time period that you have maybe after a mass challenge or something like that, and the ability to be open to those people who can help you learn some of those skills that you might not learn in the midst of this chaos. Can you talk a little bit about some of those insights that you've learned along the way?
Well, so I think everyone's different. I mean, there are people who are very structured and disciplined. There are people who work in team, people who have co-founders, and people who are like me are solo founders, right? For me, I guess I'm usually not afraid to get embarrassed, so it's okay, I go and tell people that I don't know something, and can you help me? So that's one of the things I think is very important to do. Like Ellie, who was here, she's like an advisor, and I asked, can you help me get certain skills? Because, well, I don't know. There are a lot of things that you would not know. You would not know, never being out of school, how it feels like holding a meeting with 8 senior VPs of a company, and you're sitting there, and it's I don't know how to negotiate a deal because I've not done it. I learn it, but you have to have the confidence to know that you're able to learn. So the most important thing is just being proactive in just reaching people out, having someone who has done it just before you. So I have Natalia Brickner, she's the CEO of Action System, and she was graduated just the year before me, has by now raised 17 million in making small electric propulsion system for rockets. And I look up to her and I say, okay, how did you do that, right? So it's mostly learning from other people. So it's super useful. I mean, not let your ego get into the way.
No, it's an important thing that we've talked in a variety of settings around that value, the values of both the people who have come before you to say, how do I help those people who come behind me, but also the value of the people who are coming up to say, I might not know everything. How do I have an open mindset to learning from those people who came before me?
Yeah.
And that's a critical component of growth.
But another thing to this is also that, especially in the field I do, right? I'm going to say in defense, whether it's DOD or oil and gas, and these are very not your cool startup Snapchat stuff, right? So you go to this
I know, it seems pretty cool to me, I'm not gonna lie.
You go to these meetings, and the usual crowd there is very different. It's a whole different age group than yours, and you're holding a meeting there, right? And they have been there, they know how things work, but it's also, it's also actually, they also become very biased about how they are not so receptive to the new way of thinking, right? So they might not be so open to know that, how are the different ways, you can apply something like this, right? Because, well, no, that market doesn't work, that is a small market, who will ever use this, and so on. So even though you're young, I think I've started getting comfortable, is like, when experts would say that, oh, no, they know they have been in the field 20 years, to convince them as well to have an open mindset and learn something from somebody who's, new to the field, but might bring a different perspective. So it's got to be bi-directional exchange.
Excellent. Well, I think we're going to wrap up. I got one brief question, though.
Yeah.
You obviously have tons of ideas. It sounds like you're always thinking. And I was wondering, do you have any current hobbies now that you think are going to be like a moonshot idea that you want to tackle sometime in the future? Or is it all about Hydroswarm right now, or do you have other things going on?
No, I do get distracted. I think a lot. I have a bad habit. I think too much sometimes. But that's when, But when one of all this thinking once led me to, with this AR, VR, and stuff like that, I've been a little into those, just poking around. But what I'm really fascinated is with the idea of like cyber clones. Oh, I just coined that term myself sometime back, but the idea is your own digital imprints that you can essentially have. Like, think of Alexa, but what if Alexa had your personality? How do you clone your own personality into the computer? And it's not hard, because what I'm actually playing around with is going against the conventional neural nets or conventional artificial intelligence, what you say, but more going on data-driven system, because with so much wearables, right? You use 2 Fitbits, I can actually, map out what is your walking pattern, because I can, and now everybody has a different walking pattern. So with so much data, you can actually create the personality, starting from how they walk, talk, to like a lot of different things. And that's really exciting. I mean, maybe before I die, I want to have my own little clone, cyber clone, in the cyberspace in the cloud, and yeah, it can.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We actually have a gift for you from another little Maine startup called Crate Full of Maine. Thank you very much.